Hey folks, this is Deadset with a video on Delzir's Magnum Opus builds, the set you receive at the start of Season 10. We'll go over a T13 speed farming variation as well as a Greater Rift 85 Plus capable build. Let's go! The major offense mechanic of the progression build lies in Arcane Orb, repurposed for close combat with the Arcane Orbit rune and amplified by the DMO set 6-piece bonus. Your defenses rely on the passive armor buff of Ice Armor and the set-induced damage reduction while slow time is active, as well as the combat-dependent bonuses of Spectral Blade Barrier Blades and the Explosive Blast plus Orb of Infinite Depth combo. Your mobility cooldown, Teleport, should be used offensively and defensively depending on the situation. Sometimes it will close the distance to a fight, so you can drop slow time and Halo of Release freezes, and other times it will get you out of dangerous affixes. Do not hesitate to take advantage of the Safe Passage defensive buff, as Illusionist will reset Teleport's cooldown multiple times during a fight. Remember to balance periods of stationary fighting for the Endless Walk set damage bonus with bursts of movement to a fresh fight, as the interaction between your Halo of Release and Ancient Parton defenders depends on the number of frozen enemies, and once you've already frozen, get progressively resistant to it. Contrastingly, the power of the speed farming variation comes from the relentless Explosive Blast spam, augmented by the powers of Wand of Woe, Orb of Infinite Depth, and slow time amplification from the DMO set. To keep up the costs, you'll be spamming Diamond Skin Prism, whose cooldown is effectively negated by Ingion procs. As a minor inconvenience of the playstyle, compared to a Tal Rasha Fleshfire for example, is the need to pay attention and drop slow time on top of every engagement. You'll use Teleport for active maneuvering, and Storm Armor Scramble passively in the background for the movement speed procs. Lastly, you can use any primary skill of your liking to proc the generator requirement of Focus and Restraint. Spectral Blade will serve multiple purposes in the build. First, it counts towards the DMO set 2-piece requirement, reducing slow times as cooldown for every cast. Second, as a signature skill, it falls in the category of the Shame of Delzir belt, resulting in 50% faster attack speed and up to 12 arcane power per hit, regenerating your AP reserve lightning fast when pushing with the progression spec. Third, it will empower your Arcane Orbit with the stacking mechanic of Triumvirate and Arcane Dynamo, or simply act as a proc for your Focus and Restraint during speed farm. You can tailor Spectral Blade after your needs, either with a defensive function from Barrier Blades in Greater Rift progression, or a minor damage amplifier with Flame Blades in speedruns. The basic long-range spender Arcane Orb is transformed into a close combat powerhouse with the Arcane Orbit rune, affected by the DMO 6-piece damage buff, detonating twice through the power of Unstable Scepter, and boosted even further by Triumvirate and Arcane Dynamo stacks. These orbiting Arcane Globes will chew through your enemy's health. Make a point to recast Arcane Orb at least with a stacked Triumvirate with 3 Spectral Blade attacks, but ideally after you fully stack up Arcane Dynamo as well, with 5 Spectral Blade attacks. Finally, note that the speed farming spec completely switches away from the progression build's Arcane Orb focus, replacing it with the resource management powerhouse of Diamond Skin Prism. Achieving permanent uptime through Ingion procs, this utility cooldown will reduce the costs of all skills by the impressive 9 arcane power, allowing for the trademark Explosive Blast spam of Wand of Woe builds. Slow time is integral to DMO setups, amplifying the damage of multiple skills against affected enemies, as well as cutting incoming damage by 60% for you and 30% for party members. You will augment its damage reducing properties with another 25% from the Exhaustion rune during progression, or increase damage against enemies in its radius with the Time Warp rune during speedruns. Explosive Blast will be part of both progression spec and speed farming variation, serving as protection for the former and main damage dealer for the latter. You'll be taking the multiple explosions of the Chain Reaction rune, quickly maximizing the damage reduction benefits from the Orb of Infinite Depth source. An alternative for the slot when progressing in Greater Rifts is found in the defensive and damage amplifier Magic Weapon Deflection. This long-lasting steroid remains quietly in the background and procs consistently off of spectral blades and arcane orbs. This variation allows you to run Furnace in the cube for the significant damage increase against elites, but limits your overall damage reduction. Deciding between the two variations is up to personal preference, as their performance in Greater Rifts is very comparable. When pushing Greater Rifts, immediate repositioning will often be required, evading a bad affix, engaging fresh enemies for Ancient Parton Defenders procs, or simply to gain a toughness buff without losing maxed Endless Walk bonuses. In speedrunning, it's equally vital to cut down rift clear times to a minimum. Teleport will fulfill all these purposes, either with the damage reduction of safe passage in pushes, or by covering more ground with Wormhole in speeds. For additional protection in Greater Rifts, we'll be using Ice Armor with the massive bulwark of Crystallize. The short reach of the build will inevitably put you in melee brawls, refreshing your Crystallize stacks constantly. The added value from Halo of Arlis will bring excellent crowd control on top of the mitigation, solidifying Ice Armor as the defensive spell of choice. For normal rifts, the Gold Wrap plus Boon of the Hoarder combo will take care of the protection, and you should swap Ice Armor for the reliable movement speed boost of Storm Armor Scramble. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Reworked into a comparable function to other cheat deaths, Unstable Anomaly gives you one shot at dodging a lethal situation. Operating on a standard 60-second cooldown and adding 3-second stun to nearby enemies, plus a solid 400% max life shield for 5 seconds, it will become a constant companion to your Greater Rift pushes. An alternative to this passive is Unwavering Will, synergizing with the static fighting playstyle of the build and adding significant toughness with the 20% armor buff. Another powerful survival tool is hidden in your Illusionist passive, feeding additional cooldown reduction into your slow time and turning teleport from a strategic cooldown into a constantly available asset. The requirement of 15% life taken per hit is calculated prior to mitigation and translates into any hit taken in high Greater Rifts. The additional 30% movement speed after using some of the build's core abilities is just icing on the cake. Audacity is a natural inclusion in a melee range spellcasting build like this one, bringing impressive 30% multiplicative damage increase against enemies within 15 yards. Arcane Dynamo synergizes excellently with the Greater Rift progression build that already has a signature skill build-up mechanic from Triumvirate. Offering the whopping 60% multiplicative damage increase of your next spender with fully stacked flashes of insight, Arcane Dynamo necessitates a 5 Spectral Blades to 1 Arcane Orb rotation for the pushing build. Note that during speed farming, the Explosive Blast spam spec completely negates the benefits of the controlled DPS progression passive like this one, so replace it with Evocation to further reduce time between detonations and other important cooldowns. The build incorporates the complete Dilzir's Magnum Opus set, taking all 6 available pieces and opening up the jewelry for the Endless Walk set and its damage multiplication bonuses. Area damage is important for the Arcane Orbit Wizard and is a recommended roll on the gloves, along with both crit stats and intelligence, and the shoulders, along with intelligence, vitality and life percentage. The chest and pants should remain pure toughness slots. The helm and boots can roll Arcane Orbit percentage, and it's recommended to seek the skill bonus on both. Note that stacking armor benefits you because of the balancing of sources of mitigation, as all resistance is already abundant on an intelligence-based character. As a final gearing tip for the build, note that the progression spec stacks arcane damage, with Arcane Orbit as the main damage dealer, while the speed farm spec stacks fire, being based on chain reaction, so adjust rolls accordingly. Not skipping on any of the 6 available set pieces to obtain the full Dilzir's Magnum Opus bonus allows you to split between offense and defense in the jewelry slots. One of the 2.4 reworks, the Endless Walk set, the Compass Rose Ring and Traveler's Pledge Amulet, adds a unique mechanic that slowly increases your damage by up to 100% if you remain stationary, and drains it away and increases your damage reduction while moving. This is identical to the DMO Arcane Orbit playstyle, which teleports long distances into favorably dense areas, and then transitions into a stationary Spectral Blade and Arcane Orb rotation. Your other ring slot will be taken by the pure damage boost of Convention of Elements, whose rotation of elemental bonuses you need to learn and time to maximize the benefits of the short-lived arcane proc. Understandably, both the build-up mechanic of Endless Walk and cycling damage bonuses of Convention of Elements are unfit for the speedy Torment difficulties, where they are best replaced by the Bastions of Will Set, Focus and Restraint. These rings excel at all-out offense by offering a 2.25 independent damage multiplier as long as you alternate between a primary and spender attacks, which you do by alternating between Explosive Blast and Spectral Blade. These speedrun rings are best completed with a Hellfire Amulet, as it allows you to include another farm-appropriate passive like Glass Cannon. Introduced in patch 2.4, the Shame of Dilzir belt is an arcane power regeneration powerhouse that speeds up your signature spells by 50% and restores up to 12 arcane power per hit. While this bonus will be vital in Greater Rift pushes to maintain the damage reduction of the cubed Aquila Karaz, your protection in normal rifts will be taken care of by Gold Wrap. The latter supplies you with practically infinite toughness on a good Boon of the Hoarder gold streak. In progression, the cubed Halo of Arlise finds a synergistic companion in Ancient Parton Defenders, whose unique property triggers off of freeze effects as well, which are inexplicably missing from the item tooltip. With the chain triggers of Frost Nova from the ring, diving into massive fights turns from a suicide tactic into a survival tool through the numerous damage reduction procs of the Bracer. An important playstyle tip to remember is to stay on the move, as crowd control on the same monster diminishes with each successive application, so always seek out fresh packs to reduce damage with. Naturally, these defensive precautions will be overkill in normal rifts, and Ancient Parton Defenders will go with them. They should be replaced by Nemesis Bracers, aiming to get you from one Ingion proc to another quicker by spawning elites at every shrine. The mandatory weapon of the progression build is Unstable Scepter, a 2.4 addition that not only rolls with up to 65% Arcane Orb damage, but also has a unique affix that detonates Arcane Orbs twice, effectively doubling the spec's damage output. The biggest and most important swap in the speed farming spec is, of course, in the weapon. Instead of Unstable Scepter, you use the dedicated Explosive Blast legendary Wand of Woe. As a tip to circumvent the rarity of the item, it is recommended that you collect or craft rare level 70 wands, which are called Sovereign Diabolic Wand, in bulk at the blacksmith, and then use the upgrade rare recipe in Kanai's cube. The Hope of Cain recipe, 1 rare item and 50 of the white, blue and yellow crafting materials, will only produce legendary wands, cutting down all the other one-handers in the RNG pool that you would otherwise have to deal with by regular gambling at Kadala. Triumvirate is the best in slot source for progression with the Arcane Orbit build, whose unique bonus stacks Arcane Orbit damage by up to 600% at the full 3 stacks, achieved by an easy triple attack from Spectral Blade. Orb of Infinite Depth can be used in the slot interchangeably, provided you're not using the Magic Weapon Deflection variant, depending on your better rolled item. When speed farming with Explosive Blast, however, Orb of Infinite Depth becomes the necessary companion to Wand of Woe. The fixture in your gem slots is Bane of the Trapped. Your remaining jewelry sockets will depend on content, with Esoteric Alteration and Bane of the Stricken being preferable for GR progression, and Boon of the Hoarder and Bane of the Powerful for speed farm. Bane of the Trapped is a potent source of additional damage, as it is its own multiplier in your total damage calculation. The gem procs itself with its level 25 property in melee range, perfectly suitable to both presented playstyles. Esoteric Alteration is the strongest mitigation gem available, and its impact is noticeable in the close range caster builds, improving your elemental resistances with every gem level and adding an emergency toughness spike through the level 25 property. Esoteric Alteration ensures that enemies will have a hard time bursting you down. In Torment runs, this slot is best taken by Boon of the Hoarder, whose interaction with the cubed Avarice Band and Worn Gold Wrap will keep you rich, safe and sped up throughout the run. Introduced in Season 4, Bane of the Stricken occupies the third and final jewelry socket, building up your damage multiplicatively in prolonged fights, and with level 25 bonus specifically targeting Rift Guardians. This gem is designed to assist AoE heavy builds in the struggle against single target high health enemies. In lower greater rifts or during farming, you can easily swap this gem out for the well-rounded damage and toughness increase of Bane of the Powerful. The default recommendation for the weapon slot in the cube is Orb of Infinite Depth, which turns every explosive blast detonation into a multiplicative damage increase and damage reduction bonus. Getting these bonuses up as soon as possible dictates the choice of the Chain Reaction rune. If you run the Magic Weapon Deflection variation of the Progress build, you can cube Furnace for the 50% additional damage against elites, greatly speeding up Champion and Rift Guardian fights. Finally, during speedruns, the weapon slot should be taken up by Ingiom for the ubiquitous 10-second cut of important cooldowns. Aquila Cuirass will halve incoming damage as long as arcane power doesn't dip below 90% of its reserve, which is an uncompromising teaching tool on using Spectral Blade with Shame of Dozier during GR Progress. Be mindful of your arcane power spending if you are using Explosive Blast variation to progress, as it consumes slightly more AP on a regular basis than the Magic Weapon variation. This setup will be a toughness overkill during normal rifts of course, where you can swap this slot out for Warzekian Arm Guards for their regular destruction based speed up. As a build that regularly stands toe to toe with monsters, Halo of Arlis will occupy the Jewelry Cube slot by necessity during Greater Rift progression. Halo of Arlis will multiply the effectiveness of your ice armor mitigation and provide additional crowd control. As long as the requirements of the ring are met and they are calculated pre-mitigation, it will release a constant streak of Frost Novas, unhindered by internal cooldowns. For the progression spec, the Jewelry Cube slot is interchangeable with Convention of Elements, depending on your better rolled item. When speed farming, swap this slot into the Act 3 Cash Legendary Ring, Avarice Band. Its unique property extends your pickup radius up to the massive 30 yards for a generous 10-second period. Triggered, maximized and constantly refreshed from the endless stream of Boon of the Hoarder gold, the ring and the gem will keep you sped up and invulnerable from the worn gold wrap. In the Paragon points, max out movement speed to the 25% cap and spend the rest on intelligence in the core section. Focus on crit stats and attack speed in offense. Prioritize armor, life percentage and all resistance in defense, and take area damage, life on hit and resource cost reduction in utility. And this is it for the DMO Wizard Speed Farm and Progression build. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed my guide, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the content, talk to me on Twitch and the social media link below, and I'll see you guys next time.